Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Transitions Collective. I'm your host, Mary Clavier. This week, I'm speaking with Hannah Smolinski of Clara CFO Group. Hannah provides CFO services for client based and product based businesses. We dig into why it's important to have a financial strategy, how to think about your long term planning, and what some common mistakes are that people find themselves having as it relates to financials for their business. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Hi, Hannah. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Mary. Good to see you.
Yes, thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to, well, do I dare say excited to talk about finances?
I am.
Yeah, I am too. It's very interesting and incredibly helpful. So, can you start by telling everyone a little bit about yourself and your family?
Sure. So, my name is Hannah Smolinski, and I own Clara CFO Group. That's my business, and I started it a couple years ago. I live in Seattle, Washington, and what else do we need to know? I have a husband and a newly 6-year-old child, daughter. She just turned 6 like 3 days ago, so that's been fun. And we live here, just doing our crazy life. We've got a Wheaten Terrier as well, and he's probably crazier than the child at this point.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I came into this business after leaving public accounting about, I don't know, about 7 years ago. And then I went to work for a small business. And now I left that small business after helping them with their financials. I decided to start my own business doing this for more companies. Um, so yeah, what I do now is providing CFO services for small business. And that looks like me coming alongside the business owner and being a financial strategic partner in their business. So I think we're going to talk a little bit about some of that.
Yes. Yes. Let's dive right into it. So when you partner with someone on their financial strategy, when would someone need that? What does it look like? What does their business look like when they need that help?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably safe to say that, everybody needs some financial help no matter what state they're at. But really, when they start to need someone like me, is usually when they get to a place that they are growing
Mm-hmm.
significantly and they're probably at a certain revenue range. So they've probably reached like I like to say about 300,000 in revenue. Sometimes it's a little bit earlier, sometimes it's a little bit later. It kind of depends on the type of the industry. I have some clients that wouldn't have really needed me because they were just doing their own thing, and they might be able to make $300,000 or $400,000 just in consulting services, providing services just by themselves. But when they start to add team members, that's where the dynamic gets a little bit where they need a little bit more help in figuring out when's the right time to do that. Whereas like a product-based business might need more financial strategy and maybe more guidance earlier on. So, and then sometimes product can be at a different place. But really the indicators for me are that they're growing and they're trying to make decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Do I open a location? Do I outsource my fulfillment? Do I hire someone full time? Do I outsource this position? Those types of things are questions that I get asked a lot, and those are kind of that pain point of the growing business where they start to indicate they need some financial strategy.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, I've spoken before with a bookkeeper and even a little bit into accounting. That's setting up more though in terms of basics. What you
Mm-hmm.
do is really that next level of putting together your longer term strategy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So would you say that it's how far out do you look when you're thinking about financial strategy? How far out do you look with someone?
That's a good question. I always like to, when I start working with people, I always try to first ask, where do they see the business
Mm.
ending? But
Oh,
like, what do you
yeah.
actually see for the end of the business? Because sometimes that could be a multitude of different things. You could see somebody who says, "Oh, I actually want to pass this business down to my family members. I'm really hoping that they'll grow up and they'll be like taking on this business. And then I have other people that say, I want to sell it in 3 years, or I want, to grow it to, $5 million in revenue, and then I want to sell it. And that might look like 5 years down the road. So I like to start as far out as they can possibly envision the business to be, because what the decisions that you're making now can really have an effect on where you'll be in even just 1 year, 2 years. But it kind of, it sort of is the rudder, I guess, on where we go. So if you're really trying to get out as quickly as possible, then the decisions you make right now are really different than if you're growing this for super long-term growth and stability. So
how about in terms of KPIs? Do you work with people, or do you suggest for people in their businesses to be tracking certain KPIs or certain metrics, either
absolutely.
financially or not financially?
Yeah, I mean, really with KPIs, so there's kind of a difference between like financial metrics that we look at and then KPIs. So KPIs are key performance indicators. And when I'm looking at people with their financials, we always look at things like revenue, and we set goals around revenue, expenses, and profit, and gross margin if they're a product business. So that's like after your cost of goods sold, then we look at gross margin. So I always look at those, like revenue, gross margin, and profit. Those are kind of the aftermath of the KPI. So they're like the key performance indicators are the things that are maybe more leading, where they are things that are happening outside of just the financials, like on the balance sheet or on the income statement. So they would be things like, for me, it's things like, how many leads do I get per month, and where are those leads coming in? And that is really different than what my revenue number is. So I always look at revenue, and I always suggest that business owners track their revenue and their profit. But the key performance indicators are like, what are those things before the revenue actually comes into your business? And then how like breaking those down. So that can look like your average customer value. It can look like how many customers you get per month, or it can look like a multitude of different things. And those are harder to standardize, because you really need to look and like develop that for the actual business.
Yeah, depends on the type of business and everything else.
Definitely.
What are some mistakes that you see people make when they're tracking their finances, or maybe not tracking their finances? And even with the KPIs, do you see certain common mistakes that people make before they come to you?
Well, I think the biggest mistake, like just in general around finances, is just being a little bit scared or afraid to approach it, which then you create just an avoidance mentality around finances in your business, to a point that you either just don't want to even believe it, or you don't want to look at it, and then it can't really help you if you're not looking at it. So I think that's really just the number one thing, is that there's kind of just that built up thing of, oh, it's scary, I don't want to look at it. But that's pretty easily overcome with just some practice, and either, and sometimes it's just a matter of having someone else give you the accountability to say, hey, we're going to sit down and look at this. And then finding a good financial partner that can make it less intimidating and explain it to you. Nobody is, accountants go to school for this, but most business owners don't go to school for accounting, so they're not expected to know it. And then there's people like myself, or a really good bookkeeper, or other people in people's lives that could help them explain it. So I think just taking down the fear is like the best thing we can do.
Yeah, that's a big one. That's a very big. Finances, I'd say, it's got to be one of the top 3 of topics that people are afraid of in their business.
Oh yeah. And I think legal is like another one of those. But yeah, it's just, and the thing is that it's just numbers. I mean, they're not going to do anything bad to you. Like it's really just a matter of like approaching it, and then getting a good enough understanding, because really the financials are just the aftermath of all the decisions you've been making in your business. You decide to purchase the software. It shows up on your credit card and then it flows into your P&L. You see it there. You go out and get new customers. They purchase goods and then they're on your P&L. So it's just kind of all of the activities flowing through to one document that just has some numbers on it. So it's really not that scary.
Right. Very simplified. How about systems? Are there certain systems that you recommend or prefer that people?
So a lot of my clients, and I use, if somebody's looking for recommendation, I always recommend them use QuickBooks Online. Until you get to really like $5 million plus, maybe you'd start looking into some other, there's kind of the next levels up on that, but really QuickBooks is optimized for small business, and it seems to be the easiest for me. It's one of the easier tools to get accurate accounting, and easy enough for a business owner to do themselves if they don't have an outsourced bookkeeper. But I know there's a couple other platforms out there, but I really prefer the QuickBooks.
For both product and service businesses, would you say?
Yes, product has its own special sauce called inventory. So yes, that inventory tracking is always a challenge. So I wouldn't say that QuickBooks has a fantastic inventory interface, but there are apps that integrate with it that can help if you're really trying to keep a really accurate inventory count, especially with like if you have a third party like a Shopify or Amazon, something keeping track of actual sales. So yes, I would not recommend actually any of the other like small business products for inventory, product-based business.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Yeah, I always ask people, and I make sure to specify product and service, because I find I run into my own, issues with the product-based stuff.
Well, and I mean, like, I think FreshBooks in particular, I want to say that they don't even have an inventory module. So they would really only be for a service-based type business. So you can invoice your customers. But I believe that Xero has it. And then it kind of just depends on how detailed you're getting into tracking your inventory. I've been working with some clients where we're tracking line by line in revenue and cost of goods sold. So it's accrual-based bookkeeping, and it's more of a challenge for sure, but it gets you really accurate financials. And we do that with QuickBooks Online.
Right. Wow. Okay. And then when you work with people, so you mentioned before about knowing the end game and working backwards, but then when you plan out, do you usually do like 6 months at a time, or a year or 2 years at a time? What does it look like when you're looking at financial strategies?
Yeah, so kind of the base that I look at is a year. I always try to have like a rolling 12-year kind of forecast or look, just looking forward for the actual operations of the business.
12 months, you mean?
Working.
12 months?
Yeah, 12 months. Yeah, so at the beginning of the year, I always set up budgets with my clients so that we think about, okay, what has happened in the past year? What do we know that we want to do this year? I always keep in mind people's goals for the year, because I think that individual goal setting actually has a really big impact on your financials. So if you say, oh, I want to like grow to $1 million this year. Okay, well, let's lay that out. And like, what is that actually going to take to look like in the financials? But it could also be like, oh, I want to roll out a new product line, or I want to open a new location. Okay, well, let's factor in what are those costs going to actually look like into the budget. So we do that, but then also I also do cash flow forecasting. So that is always forecasted out as far as I can get it reasonably. But typically a year runway of like actual like practical numbers in spreadsheets is usually good. But always keeping in mind those really long-term goals is always good for just the decision-making piece.
And if you have any, if you know you'll be making any big purchases or anything like for, for product business, it might be purchasing more product.
Right. Yeah. Or like, especially if you buy in bulk and it's like, okay, I have to place, a $50,000 order, but I only do 2 of those per year. You plan
Right.
out your cash so that you know when you're going to time that strategically for what's best for the business.
Right.
So,
Okay, excellent. So what do you think for someone that's earlier on and maybe they want to get to the stage of having a CFO, planning with them, they have big goals for their company. What do you think are some things that they could do to prepare if they're in the in-between?
hmm um, that's a really good question. If they are, I think in this short term is to find a good bookkeeper that is willing to at least like talk to them about their numbers. If they have a question, they can respond. I'd say that's not the role of a bookkeeper, is to advise and provide strategy. But if they just, I want them to get familiar with it. So if you can understand an income statement and a balance sheet when you're making $10,000 a year, it's going to be easier to keep track of it as you grow to 100,000, as you grow to 300,000, than to, get to 300,000 and then all of a sudden go, wow, I've never looked at my P&L and balance sheet and I have no idea what any of this means. So if you do it from the very beginning, you're going to be tying your direct association of like, I took this action and then it had this effect when I looked at my P&L. So if you start to get to that like cause and effect sort of, I think it would be really good. And then when you get to that point, if you've been doing it and you've been living it, then maybe by the time you get to 300,000, you're like, no, I got this. Like, I'm good.
No, I think we're all
But I think between that, understanding that, and then also looking forward and trying to think, okay, this happened last month. What do I think is going to happen this next month? Not just in my revenue, not just in my sales, because I think sales, like we kind of all think about, okay, we want to think about sales, right? I mean, we're always trying to grow sales. I think most business owners think about that piece. But what about the expense side too? Because once you understand revenue and then you get a really clear picture on your expenses, then you're going to be able to estimate your profit. And so if you can start to think, okay, what happened last month? What do I think this next month is going to look like? You can start to get those intuitions on, okay, what is it going to look like going forward? And then you can start to plan for the future, create those budgets, create those forecasts that I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, that's super helpful because I think it's good for people to have it in mind because the time is going to come where they want to get to that next level. So what are they working towards and how are they working towards it?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So Hannah, I have a question that I ask everyone that comes on the show.
Okay.
And that is which skill from corporate America has helped you the most as an entrepreneur?
I feel like there's a lot. Corporate America gets such like a bad rap, like for
It does, but
all the things. But the truth is that some of these organizations that we worked for, like I worked for a big four accounting firm.
yeah,
I mean, we had the top training availability in the world. I mean, I had access to amazing people and amazing resources, but I'd say it's probably a mix between, I mean, definitely leadership at a young age. I think I was able to rise into leadership really quickly and have a lot of support and also be able to see really great leadership and then maybe some not so good leadership. But I don't necessarily get those same types of experiences working in a small business, which I did when I left public accounting, and then working for myself for a while. I don't get the oversight
right.
and the people to look up to necessarily have to be that for other people. But I do think that the leadership is one huge thing. And and then kind of practically for working in the type of role that I am now is I learned a lot of how to talk about sensitive financial issues with people that are directly affected by them.
Yeah,
So I was an auditor, so I would have questions that I needed to ask that may mean that somebody screwed up in their job if they got this wrong. So like learning how to ask questions that are not necessarily like any sort of, accusatory language or anything. But, now I'm working with business owners, and that skill does transfer over, because I have to, like, somebody might be talking about the fact that, like, they have no retirement and all they have is this business. And how do we talk about that and plan for it and work around it without it being like, oh, why didn't you do this? Or anything that makes them feel like they did something wrong, or
right. Which is probably hard because, the past is the past, and how can we move forward? Yeah.
Right. So I don't know. There's lots of lessons from corporate America, but probably some top ones.
Yeah, those are great ones. Thank you for sharing those. Okay, and can you please tell our audience where they can find out more about you?
Sure. Well, you can go to my website, which is claracfo.com. And I'm also on Facebook. So it's at Clara CFO Group on Facebook. And I'm also on Instagram at Clara CFO Group. So it's the same, Instagram and Facebook. But I really hang out on Facebook more than Instagram. Instagram's kind of like,
yeah,
I dabble. I'm also on LinkedIn, which right now it's mostly just my personal profile. So we could probably link it somewhere.
We'll link it all in the show notes so that everyone can get to it.
Perfect.
Thank you so much for being on the show, Hannah. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been fun.
Talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.
I hope you really enjoyed that episode with Hannah. I thought she gave such great information about how important it is to have a plan, and I really resonated with the fact that you should not be afraid of your numbers. I know that's a big thing for a lot of people. I myself have struggled with that, but really, if you want to move forward in your business and be successful and hit your goals, it's really important that you do know those numbers and that you are tracking them. So if you'd like to hear more or contact Hannah, you can visit claracfo.com or follow her on social media, Clara CFO Group. We'll link everything in the show notes. I'd love to hear from you as well. If there's ever anything that you want me to cover in a new episode, please reach out. I'm at mary@thetransitionscollective.com. And of course, if you'd like to be a part of our community, please visit thetransitionscollective.com, sign up for our emailing list, and you'll be able to join our Facebook group. So I look forward to connecting with you in the future. Thanks, and have a great day. Bye.